All right. G'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis, podcast where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name's Pietro. I've got no Max with me today. Max is under the weather, but I do have a very special guest. So, look, usually I introduce the guests, but I think it actually is kind of a bit of a shortfall because they know what they've done better than I know what they've done. So I'm going to let our guest introduce himself today. So welcome to the show,
Yeah,
Mr. Gideon Rozner. How are you?
thank you. Yeah, so I've won several Nobel prizes, a few Pulitzers, Time Man of the Year in 2006. No, look, great to be here on the Great Collectivitis podcast. Always love speaking to my fellow libertarians. So yeah, my name's Gideon Rozner. I'm sort of retired now from or taking a break from full-time activism. Until recently, I worked for an organisation that a lot of your viewers hopefully know, the Institute of Public Affairs, Australia's oldest and loudest free market think tank. And in that capacity, I was director of policy and lead spokesman for the organisation. So I did a lot of TV, Sky News in the main, opinion writing. But beyond that, I've been active in freedom politics since my university days at the Melbourne Uni Liberal Club. Sadly, I was a Liberal Party member. Well, not sadly, sadly, I quit the Liberal Party not so long ago and joined the great Libertarian Party and having a great time there, getting to know the freedom movement. But I guess I'd describe myself as a bit like a retired footy player these days. I played in a few finals, had a few good seasons, copped some injuries, and now I come back to sort of talk about the game and offer my thoughts from my new private sector quiet career.
Like when a footy player at the end of their career goes back to their hometown and plays for the little junior club. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Libertarian Party that you've come back to.
Right, I've come home. It was a long time coming, joining the Great Libertarian Party.
Well, look, we're happy to have you, and we're hoping to make the AFL someday. Now, it might be a long time down the track, but we're aiming that way as well. Look, I've been a big fan of you for a long time, especially during the COVID stuff, which we might get to. I don't know
Mm.
necessarily. The thing that I am particularly interested in is, given the fact that I sort of followed what you've been recently talking about prior to this interview. We can
Mm.
talk about the Liberal Party or the Libertarian Party. We talk about that quite a lot, but let's talk about what you're talking about at the moment. And so the thing that I noticed is that you've been talking quite a lot about the Israel Palestine conflict, which we've been
Mm.
talking a little bit about on the show here. And as we kind of mentioned before we started recording, it's not clear what the libertarian position on this is. There is disagreement within the Libertarian Party, not
Mm.
only here and not just the Libertarian Party, but the libertarian various viewpoints around the world. I know in the US, there's
Mm.
certainly fervent disagreement on this. And so I thought it'd be interesting to explore that a little
Yeah.
bit. So starting off, what is the thing that stuck out to me early was that you made a post something along the lines of I'm a Zionist. Most Jews are Zionists. Something
Yeah.
like 95 to 99% are. And that's already a sticking point for most of the pro-Palestine protest crowd. So
Yeah.
what is a Zionist, and how does that frame the way that you look at the conflict that's happening there at the moment?
So, as a starting point, Zionism is nothing more and nothing less than Jewish nationalism. It is the idea that the Jewish nation, which has existed for millennia and has had three incarnations of statehood so far, the original kingdom of Israel that was exiled to Babylon, the nation Israel and Judea that was, I'm getting my history a little bit twisted here, but that was ended by the Romans in about 70 CE, and the modern state of Israel. Why that particular place? Well, as I just explained, there've been Jewish roots there going back to the times of Abraham, long before Jesus Christ, in fact. So the reason for that tweet was because this is the debate that Zionism has become such a dirty word. It's become a loaded term. It's become it's been put on the same level as apartheid and all these other ugly historical realities. And if you ask, the point of it all is that if you ask most Jewish people, should there be a state of Israel? Do you believe in the state of Israel? Should it exist? 95 to 99% would tell you yes. What has been but the reason for that tweet in part was that a lot of people say, oh, no, I don't have a problem with Jews. I have a problem with those filthy, disgusting, evil Zionists who control our banks and all the rest. It's become a way of saying, I'm not an anti-Semite, and look, the other thing is, I'm not an Uncle Leo type, never have been. I've never been one of these people to fly off the handle about a stupid joke or a piece of graffiti or anything else. I've been the first to say, no, look, we can, not every stupid joke ends in a Holocaust. But the strength of, look, I can understand why there are, Arab Australians on the streets, people of Palestinian, as misguided as they are and as ugly as that is and as terrible as some of that is, I can understand. What I can't understand is why so many, white Western people with names like McLeod and McDonald and things like that are so fervently, again, really engaging in you can disagree with the state of Israel and its policies without being anti-Semitic, but sometimes the line gets blurred. And I think a lot of the conduct we're seeing, has crossed that line. So that was that tweet, which is, Zionism is not this evil, disgusting, dirty word. It certainly shouldn't be, used as a stand-in for Jewish people more broadly. It's a very benign concept. Should there be a Greek state? Should there be an Italian state? Should there be an Australian nation? It is taking aim at this sort of double standard that holds Israel and the Zionist cause to a completely different standard to every other nation in the world.
Yeah, and look, I'm with you that a lot of the protests have shown that there is the left will jump onto a cause that they perceive to be the righteous cause of their own, and somehow, even though there is, I believe there is a coherent and, in my view, correct anti-war point of view that the Palestinians are being oppressed in many ways, but they make it in the worst possible way, and in that alone, conflating the sort of coherent message that there is from that side of the argument with the anti-Semitism and the horrific language and the boycotting of Jewish businesses here, which has absolutely nothing to do with what the actual argument is, that the state of Israel has made errors along the way as well. I would like to talk.
That's a very thing, because this is the language. Oh no, we can't use Zionist businesses. Well, are they Zionist businesses? Like Spotlight, for example. Oh well, they're owned by Zionists. Oh, you mean So yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, essentially that's it, right? Conflating the term Zionist with the state of Israel and the actions of the state of Israel, which is a very collectivist thing, which we tend to rail against on this show. So I am curious, given this, would you agree? So I guess the direction that we'll go here kind of depends on the answer, your answer to the next couple of questions. So first of all, okay, so do you believe that the military actions in Israel at the moment by the Israeli government led by Netanyahu's decision making, do you believe that that's the correct course of action here in leveling Gaza and attacking Gaza?
Yeah, it's not a matter of correct or incorrect. It's the only option for the IDF if the Israeli Defense Forces, if the objective is to get rid of Hamas. The Hamas has said that, to give you, 2005 was when Israel basically disengaged from Gaza. Every settlement was dismantled. Every Israeli was pulled out of there. In some cases, in most cases, in fact, literally kicking and screaming. In the interceding 18 years, Gaza has been turned into the world's biggest terrorist camp. There are tunnels galore beneath schools and hospitals and all those buildings that are housing Hamas facilities. Hamas, we know, put their installations in hospitals, in residential neighborhoods and so on. They're very good at hiding. The only way to have gotten at those leaders is by, unfortunately, taking the actions that have been taken. There is no other. When you have people who are hiding themselves under civilians, it's very unfortunate, but that is the only way that Hamas was able to be eliminated. And let's not forget also that Israel gave a clear window saying, evacuate, get out now. In fact, Israel has been facilitating humanitarian evacuations. There is footage floating around right now of Israeli tanks and soldiers standing guard while a column of Palestinian civilians is moving on foot south because Hamas have been not only preventing and not only telling their own people this is Zionist propaganda, don't believe it, you're not going to be bombed, don't flee, but they have been actively preventing and in some cases shooting people who have attempted to evacuate. Why? Because Hamas clearly has no regard for human life. They're a barbaric medieval death cult in the same way that ISIS is. And for them, dead Palestinians equals more numbers that they can give to Western media outlets that run with it to fuel a propaganda war. They are using their own city. People ask me, like, "Oh, but surely you must feel sorry for the Palestinian people." Of course I do. Not just because of this, but because they have been let down by their own corrupt and murderous leadership for 75 years. I heard the other day somewhere that Gaza over the years, in the last 18 years, has received more aid than the entire, or maybe not the 18 years, but on some level has received more aid than every European country under the Marshall Plan after World War II put together. They've received billions of dollars in foreign aid. And again, this method is occupied and there are settlers is just playing false in the case of Gaza because, again, in 2005, Israel completely withdrew. All the evil settlements that people are holding up as the problem to this conflict, Israel pulled every settler, the thousands of settlers that were in Gaza, out by the Israeli army. They demolished their homes. They gave Gaza back to the Palestinian people, lock, stock, and barrel, saying, "You've got it. Build a state. Do whatever you want." Hamas, got their finger on the hands on the levers of power there, and instead of using all that aid to build homes and hospitals and schools and civilian infrastructure, they built rockets. In fact, there are videos floating around of Hamas ripping up civilian piping for water and turning those pipes into rockets to fire at Israel. Right? So, again, we can look at the footage of Gaza and leveled and so on, which, sadly happens in war. It happened in Dresden in World War II and so on. But that is entirely the fault of Hamas. This could all have been avoided if Hamas, well, firstly, they didn't, invade Israel and engage in this killing spree anyway. But secondly, the minute they would have released the hostages, this could have been, and surrendered, this could have been over. It hasn't been because of the actions of Hamas.
Yeah, no, I mean, no doubt that Hamas are the bad guys here, right? There's no doubt that they are, I would say, more culpable, certainly more culpable than the Israeli state and the Israeli government. Okay, so here I think potentially that might be a point for discussion. The other question that I had was on a policy level. So, okay, you are in favor of the Israeli military actions in Gaza. You believe that that's the only way to get rid of Hamas.
Look, and we can go through individual examples. I'm sure mistakes have been made. I'm sure collateral damage collateral damage happens. Well, I'm not going to say everything that the Israeli army does is always correct and 100%, but there is a clear moral difference between what we saw on October 7th, which was terrorist militants entering a sovereign state and deliberately going after women, children, elderly people, civilians, not just killing them, raping them, breaking limbs, the most barbaric and disgusting, form of warfare you could possibly imagine. There is a clear moral difference between that and an army that engages in genuine warfare and incurs collateral damage, largely because that collateral damage has been set up in advance by the belligerent state, or that they've actually set things up in a way that would maximize civilian casualties for their own propaganda purposes. Again, I'm not giving a blank check to everything the IDF ever does on anything, but I mean, come on. There is no moral equivalence here. There just isn't. War is bad. War is terrible. I'm a pacifist too in the libertarian tradition. But ask yourself this: if a group of militants in Tasmania or something took over the island and started using that to launch rockets at Melbourne and came over on boats and started raping and killing, do you think the Australian army would say, ooh, I don't know, a little of collateral damage there. Any nation in the world would have responded in the same way. In fact, what they wouldn't have done is what Israel does that no other nation, army in the world does, which is drop leaflets saying we're about to bomb. What country sends out a save the date card for an invasion? But that is exactly what the state of Israel does to try to minimize civilian casualties. Again, I'm sure, the RDF makes mistakes. There are people, there are footage of Israeli politicians saying, they're all animals and so on and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that one side has 100% people of pure heart on it, but what I am saying is that, this moral equivalence is really twisted, frankly.
Yeah, no, and look, I've heard that term, the moral equivalency argument before, and I hear that a lot from the sort of the pro-Israel side, and I suppose my problem with that is that it's not actually a moral equivalency. I don't make any assertions that the Hamas is acting in far worse faith than the Israelis, but it kind of overlooks the fact that despite the Palestinians are using human shields as part of their warfare, but engaging in that warfare means that implicitly you are accepting that innocent civilians will die, and that's I think where
so what's then the option for Israel? What should they have done?
Well, okay, so but let's circle back to that. So I'll make a note. So what is the option for Israel? Because the other question I wanted to ask on a policy level to see if because I suspect we probably agree on this, we may not. Is it correct that Australia or the US or any these other foreign countries should be sending military aid to Israel, in your opinion?
Look, that's a matter for them. Certainly, as a libertarian, I'd say it's not ideal that we. No, well, as a libertarian, I'd say no. We shouldn't get involved in other conflicts. As somebody who's had the benefit of the state of Israel my whole life and wants it to exist, it helps. I wouldn't say no, but look, as a matter of principle, I agree with you. But certainly, there have been calls for the US to stop selling weapons to Israel. I don't think that's on. I think Israel has every right to purchase weapons to defend itself. In fact, it is faced by hostile countries for miles around it. So yeah, no, we can agree on that. No, but again, I'm not complaining too much about it. Okay. So there you go. There's my inconsistency. But I'll give you that one.
And of course, weapons sales, trade is the foremost most important thing now. It's kind of ironic in this sense, but there's the Frederick Bastiat quote, which is when goods cross borders, armies don't. So always the trade, that sort of thing shouldn't be discouraged.
And the free market is that is one of the biggest, certainly one of the biggest victories of the Trump administration. The fact that people say, "Oh, Trump, that terrible anti-Semite." Incidentally, he made more Middle East peace deals than every president before him put together. But secondly, the Emiratis in the middle of Dubai, they were playing the Israeli national anthem a few years ago. Why? Because the Emiratis and the Saudis and a whole lot of other countries are actually realizing Israel's actually a pretty good country to trade with. They've got some cool tech. So the free market. If libertarians watching this take nothing else, it is the encouragement that the great historical Rubik's Cube of peace in the Middle East has been solved in part by the free market, by capitalism, by trade. That's a good story right there.
I'd be very interested to hear the reasoning behind someone calling Trump an anti-Semite when he, the Abraham Accords is
that kind of thing, and they call him a Nazi, certainly, and Nazi to me connotes anti-Semitism, but what do I know? It's 2021. I need to educate myself, but
Nazi is anyone who's slightly to the right of center nowadays. I thought you were well aware of that.
Nazi is people who the Trots disagree with. I'll be called a Nazi more times than I've had a breakfast.
So yeah, well, the point was with the Abraham Accords, Trump was actually very, very favorable to the Israeli state, to the point of essentially the point of those is to get Lebanon and Egypt to stop supporting the Palestinian humanitarian cause and stop talking about it in Gaza, which certainly I think favored Israel. the question that we're going to circle back to. So, what is the option for Israel here? And so this is a question which, look, obviously incredibly complicated, complex situation, which dates back to intergenerationally far before I was before either of us were born, and
Well, we should talk about that too, because that's a big part of this, and a big part of the because there are two sort of factors. Is talking about war and the actions of the army and that kind of thing, which is legitimate and an area for debate. And there's the other side of it, which is, well, Israel shouldn't exist at all because it's a colonial bloody apartheid regime that was cooked up by a bunch of European Jews and their American backers, and they came and stopped Palestinian land. I mean, we only have an hour today, but for 10,000 reasons, there's a lot of extremely misguided historical revisionism. And again, that gets back to the point of what Zionism is. Is it some creature of capitalist American evilness, or is it a genuine national movement? I would say the latter. But unfortunately, there are, as I speak right now, it's a Sunday in Melbourne, there are 10,000 lunatics probably marching around Melbourne, who have no idea what the hell they're talking about, because they're trots, and as you said, they just jump on the next big thing. They just got bored of protesting for land rights for gay whales, or whatever the hell they're on about on any given day.
Have you seen the queers for Palestine banners and anyway, sorry, I thought that was funny.
Queers for Palestine, let me tell you, there are a large number of queers from Palestine who have been taking refuge in Israel for a very long time, not just from Hamas either, from the West Bank as well. There are a lot of gay Arabs and Palestinians who go to Israel because that's where they can, that's where they're not.
That's where they don't get shot. Yeah. Essentially.
Or dropped off buildings.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay. So you were saying we do need to talk about the intergenerational thing, because there's
the history. Because again, okay. So, as I sort of touched on at the beginning, there have been. I mean, the Jewish people originated from that place, and that's not just a biblical thing. Archaeological records confirm the existence of Jews there as early as the 13th century. It existed in various incarnations. The last expulsion was in 70 CE under the Romans. But I mean, some Jews remained, most fled, and then they went to Europe and Spain and the Middle East and Ethiopia and all sorts of other places. That was the Great Diaspora. But it never disappeared from Jewish prayer or liturgy or anything like that. And in the 1800s in particular, there was very strong waves of Jews back to what was then part of a region in the Ottoman Empire called Palestine, but that continued in earnest. And at that time, the population was very, very low. There were about 400,000 people in the entire area that we call there by some estimates. Jews started moving back there, developing the land. Once it became a major population center, a lot of Arabs moved there as well. That continued throughout the Ottoman Empire, which fell obviously after the First World War. At that point, there were all these former Ottoman territories, including Palestine, but also Jordan and the Middle East and all sorts of other places. Those were granted to states that were deemed capable of having a nation state at that time. And various countries took mandates over the other parts, one of which was Palestine, which wasn't just the strip of land that you see now, but it also included Jordan. That was cut in half. Transjordan was the other place it was the other country on the other side of the Jordan River, and it became Jordan. And in 1947, there was a plan put before the United Nations saying, look, the British mandate is ending. There is a Jewish population. There is an Arab population. The most sensible thing to do is to have a compromise, to have two states, one an Arab state, one a Jewish state. That plan was adopted by the UN. The Jewish agency at the time said, "Yep, okay, it's not perfect, we'll take it." And the land that was given to Israel was mostly desert and places like that. The other Arabs said, "Absolutely not. We will not share our land with Jews. We don't want Jews in our neighbourhood. This is terrible." And then in 1948, when Israel declared independence, about 5 Arab countries invaded at the same time. Israel fought them off, conquered a little bit more territory, held it, and then the areas, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank was occupied by Jordan, and Gaza was occupied by Egypt. In 1967, again, all these same countries attacked Israel again, and Israel then seized Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the West Bank from Egypt and Jordan, respectively. In the 1970s, under a peace deal with Egypt, Israel gave back the entire Sinai Peninsula, but that was around the time we started, the Yasser Arafats of the world came on the scene and started agitating for Palestinian nationhood. Now, in the intervening years since then, there have been attempts galore to find a two-state solution and to give Palestinians the state, autonomy over the places or statehood over the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Most recently, or one of the most recent times, the most recently was actually under Trump, the 10th plan that the Palestinians or the Arabs rejected. But the most generous deal was offered by Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak in 2000, which would have given the Palestinian people 97% of the area that is West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The other 3% would have been compensated for with equivalent land, by equivalent land on the Israeli side. They would have had underpasses, airports, all manner of aid. They had every opportunity to build a state, and they said, "No, we want it all." And whatever you think of what I've just said about Zionism and so on, having it all, just disestablishing the state of Israel is not realistic or desirable. And there's this idiotic socialist school of thought that, look, there should just be one state of Palestine and Jews and Arabs can live there equally in a secular socialist state. What planet are these people on? Do they honestly expect that if that happened, the Jewish population would be left alone, that all their heat would go to the issue? Of course it wouldn't. Of course it would. So that's the context people have to understand. This is not some white settler project from another instance in evil Whitey, this is a genuine national aspiration and a beautiful country and a wonderful country. So
I don't disagree with that, especially I'm kind of my view of the situation as it exists, post whoever, obviously there's going to be people who are moved and who are displaced, who are going to feel wronged regardless of everything that happened during the 20th century, like that, and that's going to happen. And
understandably, and it's not. Look, India was partitioned. India was partitioned at exactly the same time, I might add, in 1948. And some Hindus had to leave what was becoming Pakistan and move to India, and some Muslims had to move out of what was India and go to Pakistan. Is it ideal? No. Is it great that in war people get, and partitioning of this nature, people leave their homes? Sure. You know how many Jews left the West Bank, not to mention Iraq and Yemen and Syria and Egypt and Lebanon?
And Germany.
More to the point, though, it's not what happened in 1948 and the population shifts. It is what happened after. And again, I make the point. The Palestinian authorities have had every opportunity and billions of dollars in aid. You talk about giving Israel aid. To this day, Australia is sending aid to the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
And all the goodwill in the world was there to build a state and to eventually achieve statehood. But instead, that was spent on rockets and on. Again, the biggest oppressors of the Palestinian people are their own leaders. They have been keeping, not just in Gaza, but in the Jenin refugee camp. Why have they been living in a refugee camp for 75 years? Did nobody think of building permanent housing for these people? Did any of their Arab brothers think about taking refugees in? No.
Well, and on the Palestinian Authority. So this is kind of the argument that I am yet to see I'm yet to see a response that has convinced me from the side of the pro-Israeli side, and it's essentially I'm very critical of Netanyahu and the Likud party in general, and
look up. Just do yourself a favor and look up what Netanyahu did to what his economic reforms are. I'm not saying I've got a bit off Bibi since October 7 as well, because you can't have that happen on your watch and still have your legacy remain intact. We'll still have to get to the bottom of who was behind it. But free marketeers should look up what Bibi did for the Israeli economy. He took it from a semi-socialist country to the free market behemoth that it is today.
That's not the aspect of it that I'm critical.
No. But I just want libertarians to go away and do a bit of homework on Bibi's, his economic agenda. He makes, Margaret Thatcher look like bloody Stalin, a lot of what he achieved. So, yeah. Anyway,
right.
Go on.
Let me
No,
be
that's what I'm
critical
doing,
of
you
him for a
know.
moment though, because this is
Mm.
this is kind of the crux of the argument from the people that I've been following, who are, I think, good libertarians and
Mm.
are very critical of the Israeli invasion. So this is antiwar.com Scott Horton, who's a
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge on all of this stuff. And there's so these two quotes from 2019. One is from Gershon Hakohen, who was a major general in the reserves and an associate of Netanyahu. And this
Mm.
article is called "Netanyahu's support for Hamas backfired," and it
Yeah.
suggests that Netanyahu essentially was pro supporting Hamas for the
Mm.
reason that as long as Hamas was in power, it would
Yeah.
delegitimize any kind of conversation about a genuine two-state solution. While he was in front
Yeah.
of the UN and in front of the US, he was talking about, he would mention, two-state solution in the future.
Yeah.
But the quote from Gershon Hakohen is, we need to tell the truth. Netanyahu's strategy is to prevent the option of two states. So he's turning Hamas into his closest partner. Openly,
Yeah.
Hamas is an enemy. Covertly, it's an ally. And in the
Yeah.
same year, Netanyahu said this in front of members of his Likud party in the Knesset, the Israeli House of Reps.
Yeah.
And he said, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas.
Yeah.
This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. So in Scott Horton's words, to prevent, like he's preventing the option of having a conversation in good faith with the Palestinians. So I'm yet to see a convincing response for why the Hamas attack. Yes, Hamas is evil. I abhor them. I think, and they should.
No, I get the question. Look, look. I won't defend that. I don't agree with that. To the extent, I think that was naive. It was stupid, and it was self-defeating. What I will say, though, charitably, to play devil's advocate, is there are good reasons why. I mean, look, I favour a two-state solution, but it has to be two peaceful states living alongside each other. Again, India and Pakistan sometimes butt heads. But broadly speaking, Pakistan has not spent the last 75 years launching rockets at Indian cities day in, day out. So there is a school of thought that the idea is, look, we don't want to, because think about it. There's a Palestinian state. Well, Gaza was a quasi-Palestinian state. There was absolutely no Israeli influence over it whatsoever for 18 years. But what's just happened? Well, after 18 years, it got so bad there, the terrorism and the Hamas leadership, that they had to reoccupy it effectively. So you would just enter the same cycle. You have a Palestinian state for about 5 minutes before Israel could no longer tolerate the attacks coming, and they'd invade again. But broadly, to bolster Hamas again, at the very least, and putting it euphemistically, that's idiotic. But also, I'll say again, I make the point: Bibi was not prime minister of Israel in the 1930s when the Arabs rejected the Peel Commission. Bibi was not around in 1947 when they rejected the partition plan. It was not around in 1967 when they rejected an offer to effectively start handing back the Gaza and West Bank to some, Arab authority or some Palestinian authority. It wasn't there during the Oslo Accords were some progress, I'll admit, but he wasn't there in 1999. He wasn't there in 2000. He wasn't there throughout the many attempts. It's one thing to say this is a reaction to the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu, right? But by that logic, why would you rise up against, the likes of Yitzhak Rabin or Ehud Barak, or the majority, for the majority of Israel's existence, the prime minister was from the left-wing Labour Party. That made no difference either. So, okay, that was bad, and Israel have been punished for that decision, and then some. And Bibi will certainly be punished by history and by his own people. But this idea that all of these issues can be traced down to the fact that some evil right-wingers are in power in Israel, it's simplistic and false. That's a yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think there is a lot more blame on his shoulders than is kind of spoken about at the moment, because the binary that's been created is, okay, support Israel or support Palestine, or even kind of even saying support Hamas. But I think I mean, as a libertarian, I find the state is so often more pervasive in its blame than we give it credit for. And at the end of the day, whether it is the Palestinian state that's not playing in good faith, or whether it's Hamas, or whether it's the state of Israel, or whatever it is. It's the innocents and it's the civilians that suffer.
Absolutely.
And every retaliation is a self-perpetuating cycle, because the other argument I was going to make, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, is that I don't believe that. Okay, let's put aside the moral, the morality of attacking Gaza to get rid of Hamas and to obliterate Hamas. I don't think it's like a pragmatic, wise move for Israel to be doing this, because who is Israel surrounded by across in the whole of the Middle East? Now, as much as, yes, we don't succumb to the to terrorists and to evil other governments and, anti-Semitic Muslims and whatnot, but were it not for the US's unanimous support for Israel militarily, Israel wouldn't even be able to make this move. So in making
probably not
this move, like, what is Hamas's plan at the end of the day? Like, what was Hamas's goal with this terrorist attack? To provoke an overreaction from Israel, I would argue. Israel is giving them exactly that. And Hamas's only move, because, I mean, technologically, Hamas are clearly inferior than the Israeli army. And so their only move was to try and, reignite this Muslim union, Muslim kind of hatred for Israel. And I think that's been achieved.
And not only that, it was also, there's a theory that, I mean, Iran was, was up to their elbows in this stuff too, and they were, very involved. And the broader theory is that this was a ploy by Iran to drive a wedge between Saudi Arabia and Israel, because they were on the cusp of normalizing relations. Now, that would be an amazing development in world history. Saudi Arabia and Israel making peace. I pray for the day, I really do. And the reasons for that are, largely because of the tensions between the Sunni Arab world and the Shia Persian sort of nexus. Saudi, Iran does not want an alliance between, the de facto leader of the Arab world and the Jewish state. It'd just be too powerful for them to fight. So that was part of that's the theory anyway.
And I mean, and Hamas's goals certainly were also to disrupt the possibility of that happening, or, Iran, if they are backed by them, but disrupting that and disrupting the Abraham Accords, which by all accounts now have been, put on freeze, because the what is it, Lebanon and Egypt are critical now of what the Israelis are doing. So
Lebanon always will be. Lebanon's Hezbollah. So Jordan and Egypt were the two countries that Israel's had peace with for the longest. Yeah, Jordan's been critical. Yeah. But, at the same time, there was a meeting of the entire sort of Arab League and with Iran and, a few others as well. And Iran put forward a plan to cut off diplomatic relations and to, boycott and to, do all sorts of things. That was actually scuttled by like 6 Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Sudan, Bahrain, and one other escapes me. But the point is that, I think a lot of countries might be paying lip service, but they know. Can you imagine if there were belligerents like Hamas in Saudi Arabia? The Saudis would not be trying to minimize civilian casualties. I'll tell you that. The Saudis would just a fire of 1,000 suns.
Yes, and I mean, I think the broader point in all of this, and the reason that I am maybe sounding overly critical of the Israelis' response, is because we treat Israel to the standards of the Western world. Like, I'm not saying like the reason that the not firing on civilians, not civilian casualties are an absolute, at all costs, something that we must avoid. I'm not saying that the Arab world is lives up to those standards. In fact, the way that Hamas is fighting, certainly not only attacking foreign citizens, but using their own citizens as fodder to try and gain popular support, obviously is horrific. But this idea is, Israel is the Western world's beacon there in the Middle East. So I mean,
correct. But no. The West would not be held to these standards either. Again, can you think of any country in the world, right? If a country was invaded by a belligerent terrorist state, and those terrorists went around killing innocents, raping people in front of their kids while they bake in an oven, cutting breasts off, and all the horrible. Again, so horrible stuff is happening in Gaza too. But that is, as awful as it is, that is collateral damage during war. If any other country in the world had an October 7th, they would not be. They would not think twice about civilian casualties or collateral damage either. Now, no other country in the world carpet bombs places they're about to bomb in for real with leaflets saying "Get out." No other country. Israel bombed Iraq's nuclear weapons facilities back in like the 80s or 90s or something, and they actually called the nuclear facility in Iraq and said, "Get out! We're about to bomb." They cared about the lives of Iraqi nuclear scientists. So I get that Israel's a Western country; they should know better. But I don't think any other Western country would have reacted differently.
I'm with you. And to get back to that pragmatism point is that okay? So let's consider the comparison, which I think is pertinent here. Is okay? October 7th or October 6th? 7th.
I think it was October time. We'll that anyway, whatever it was.
So October 7th is an equivalent to like it's kind of Israel's equivalent to 9/11 in many ways. And what came from 9/11 is that immediately
that's a good point.
The best, all of the biggest voices for war took over and overreacted and led to 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, like you can understand the Americans enlisting to go fight this war. There's nothing more powerful than like the feeling of righteous retribution. Like I think that's more powerful than fear. I think that's more powerful than propaganda. I mean, obviously there was a lot of propaganda in there. I think like that, and it's not that it's I can empathize with it.
Yeah, you can understand it, but it's not a good idea. Yeah, I get that. And look, that was a big I get the point you're making, and that was actually that was my concern. Because I lived through 9/11, and I remember when everybody was like, okay, let's bomb Afghanistan. Let's bomb the shit out of them. We got to bomb something. That's a bit simplistic. Bin Laden was there, and despite what you see on TikTok, I think it was probably a good idea to take out Osama bin Laden. But and that was my concern too. I thought, Israel's 9/11. Well, shit, the aftermath of 9/11 did not work out very well for the United States. And we have had 20 years of blood and treasure and so on. And even if you can say, okay, it was understandable that they invaded Afghanistan, disastrous as that was ultimately, there was absolutely no reason to be in Iraq, and we can all see the stupidity of the neocon experiment now. So my concern was, okay, Israel might overreach and suffer a similar fate. It doesn't seem like that has been the case. I mean, considering collateral damage has been high, and because of all the Hamas human shields and stuff which we discussed, but making allowances for that, it does appear to be a reasonably targeted operation. It seems to be over, they seem to have routed Hamas pretty decently by now. What happens after this? I mean, there'll be some sort of occupation to, while they find an authority or some sort of governing arrangement capable of, looking after it without rockets coming in, all sorts of other things. But this doesn't look like a forever war kind of thing. Israel's not going to say, right, now we need to, go after, or maybe they will. But, it at this point, it seems to be holding and not, it doesn't seem to result in, idiotic neocon fantasies like we saw in the mid-2000s.
Well, speaking of idiotic neocon fantasies, the problem here is also that if Israel does stop at Gaza, and I don't know what the final outcome is going to be. Netanyahu's also being deliberately obscure about what is going to happen at the conclusion of it. But
he probably doesn't know either. Like this is it's a serious, like it'll take a lot of consideration. There are no good answers in any of this shit.
Yes,
there never has been. So
that's obvious,
as you said, we need cooler heads to prevail. So I think I don't think there's anything wrong in just biding time and assessing options. Once the initial threat of Hamas is taken out, that's when we get to the drawing board and do some serious thinking, I guess.
Well, the problem that I was going to raise, though, is that, yes, there are those vociferous neocons who have reawoken from their slumber in the US. I mean, Nikki Haley, the disgusting war profiteer, has immediately. I thought it was the voices that I listen to on on these topics. They always talk about how like the neocons have been looking for this war with Iran for years and years and years and years. And I kind of thought, okay, it must be kind of the way that they conduct policy or the way they talk behind closed doors, and you can infer that that's what they want. And then I listened to the Republican debate. Nikki Haley is just blatantly like, I want to kill Iranians. I want to profiteer off this. I want to make war. Like it's not even hidden. So the fear is like, okay, even if Israel stops here, is the US going to? Like the US has been looking for this for a long time, and that entangling alliance is, that the domino effect of continuing war.
Well, the US can't bloody afford to. They can't afford another war. They can't even afford their Medicare entitlements right now. So yeah, that would be especially at a time when America might damn well be at war with China, within the next few years. So opening up another front in the Middle East, that would be foolhardy. But again, they're two sort of separate issues. What Israel does and what the US does. But yeah, lest your viewers be in any doubt, I've not returned. I'm not. I don't think it's 2003 again, and I think we can go around spreading democracy at gunpoint. But there is a difference between, again, going off on foreign adventures to, under some dream of democratizing the Middle East, with guns and bombs, and taking out a terrorist regime, on your doorstep. One's a little. You can again. I'm a pacifist, and I'm certainly not a neocon, but I'm realistic. And again, we in Australia can make any aspersions we want, but our government would do the same thing. Any government would, and maybe that's the point. It's as you said, states, government. Government is the problem.
Yeah, and an observation that I kind of had in this is that for whatever reason, like the propaganda of war propaganda only needs to be like believed or loud or realistic for it has a much shorter lifespan than any other sort of propaganda needs to be. So like the comparison I would make is so with the COVID and the COVID mandates and stuff, like the fact that they were necessary kind of had to be continuously drilled in over a long period of time. And if that facade started to drop, then the numbers started to drop, and they kind of had to keep it going. It had to be maintained for a really long time for it to be effective and for the outcomes that the government wanted to be enacted. War propaganda, not for whatever reason, only needs to be like really, the lie only needs to be really loud and really pushed for a much shorter period of time, and then after that you're already in the war. Like with the Ukraine-Russia thing, for example. Now I don't know, I assume you're not supportive of the fact that the US pushed Ukraine to fight with Russia for such a long time. Well,
people compare Ukraine and Israel and all in this Palestinian thing, and they're totally different issues. But it is.
But the point though that I was making is, so I've got a neocon uncle, and had a massive sort of dust up with him about this. And the lie, and it's also the lie that was continuously, I heard a lot at the time, was, well, we have to stop Putin here because otherwise he's going to take all of Europe. He wants to take all of Europe, and if you don't stop him here, and Zelensky was saying the same thing, either you fight him here or you'll be fighting him in Europe when he tries to take on the rest of NATO.
Correct.
Obviously, no one's even saying that now, that it looks like Putin's going to win, and it looks like all we did in Ukraine was make sure that a whole bunch of Ukrainians died for no gain, and to try and hurt Russia a little bit. But it only needed to be believable for that short period of time while the initial decision was made, and then it doesn't matter. And that's the fear here, is that I'm not saying it's happened yet, and possibly it's now there's the threat. I heard Jordan Peterson was saying that there's 3 months till Iran has the bomb, the nuclear bomb. Now, whether there's any credibility for that or not, it doesn't matter, because all that needs to be believed for is for the next few weeks while a decision is made, and then we're in a war.
And then we're in for years and years. And that's look, again, there is a difference between a localized, regionalized conflict and a world war. And you're right. I mean, more broadly, we are sleepwalking into World War III. If America again is stupid enough to bring on a bigger war with Iran, and I think Iran is. I don't know if it's 3 months, but it is close to having the bomb, and that is a serious problem. And that'll, have to be addressed. I don't think it necessarily warrants an invasion. You can just bomb their facilities or find other ways. But it is a problem. But yeah, there are people who are itching for a war here now. If they make a play for it, if America gets involved in Iran, the Tricoms will think beauty. It's time to take Taiwan, and then we'll be at war because of AUKUS and ANZUS and 10,000 other reasons. And to answer your question, though, why war is such a powerful way of getting the citizenry to behave themselves, and why the wars, when they're based on falsehoods, as many wars have been, why the lies are so powerful is because people are scared. War scares people. We've seen people agreed. We talked a bit about the corona thing. We agreed. We saw the majority of the Australian population agree to the most terrible attacks on freedom that we've seen in any Western country in peacetime anywhere ever. Why? Because they were frightened. Now, if that's what happened when people were frightened of a bloody, bad flu, can you imagine what the state is going to do to us when it's actual war? We will have censorship. We will have rationing. We will get used to bigger attacks on our freedom, and those won't be taken off after the war is over. So there is a real clear and present danger here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean the libertarian insight there is that, as with COVID, there's that no crisis goes unexploited by the state, and so I mean, whether you believe that like the lab leak was intentional or not, I don't believe it was intentional, but I believe that
I think it's intentional because I wouldn't release it there; they'd release it in Detroit or something.
But
seriously, why would they? I think it was an accident. I think I heard that some worker sold one of the bats in the market or something. So both anyway, but yeah, it was whatever the case is. We've seen again. We saw what happened when governments go to war against the fucking flu. What's going to happen when they go to war for reals? Shit, what the fuck then? Buy Bitcoin while you still can, friends.
Yeah, and I suppose that I suppose that's kind of the point, right? Is like I don't believe it was intentionally released, but I believe that the moment that it was released, immediately the state started expanding its tendrils to see what freedom it could take and to see how it could expand. And in the same vein, they
succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, I'm sure.
Yeah, they were really impressed with how well it all worked. But and I don't believe, for example, that Netanyahu had any intention of not even intention. Like I don't think he even foresaw the possibility of the attack on Israel. But immediately the move was to take Gaza and to expand his sort of his idea that a two-state solution, and I don't think Netanyahu believes in a two-state solution at all, and he's making it as impossible as he possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's been a to put it, as I said, a misstep to the extent that's gone on. But yeah, I don't see the opportunism because does Israel want Gaza? What does Gaza have? Israel itself is about a third the size of Tasmania. Gaza is tiny, tiny, tiny. There's no strategic. There are no resources there. There's no.
Well, I don't think
they want to take over. They're not going to. I don't think in any event.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Israel wants. Well, yeah, I don't think Israel wants Gaza to be part of anything really, but part of Palestine necessarily. I don't know. I'm speaking out of turn here. I actually don't know.
Netanyahu is one thing, and the right-wing coalition is one thing. But again, he has been supporting this war by Yair Lapid and in the Yehud Baraks of the world as former Labor people. I mean, there is across the board recognition that something has to be done. This isn't, saying, oh, great, we can take Gaza now and expand settlements or whatever. There is a universally within Israel acknowledged need to take Hamas out. What happens after that? That's where the debate might come in. But I think there'll be an occupation while because you can't just blow it up and then leave and say, great, Hamas, the clock starts now and start rebuilding again. But I don't think this isn't like a blood for oil type, great, now's our chance.
No, I don't believe that. There's so a couple more questions. One point I wanted to make and another question I wanted to ask you. We're sort of getting close to the end, but
let's keep going. I could go for a little while longer.
Okay, well, happy to keep going then. So the point, one point that I an observation, I suppose, that I'll get your thoughts on is so post 9/11. If we continue along this comparison of 9/11 and October 7, post 9/11, there was an incredible amount of goodwill around the world for the Americans, right? Putin called up and said, "Hey,
Yeah.
anything you need." There was even in the Middle East, like even
Yeah.
there was the report of like this stadium in Iran that 60,000 people that had a moment of silence for. And this is
Yeah.
Iran, right? Like that.
But Iranians are good. The Iranians are good people, though. There was a soccer match at the start after October 7th where in Iran where somebody brought a Palestinian flag and the other people booed him and made him leave and take it down, all sorts of other things. But anyway, that notwithstanding. But I get where the question's going, which is Israel will lose its goodwill.
Yes.
Sure, and that's a calculus they've had to make. And Avi Amini tweeted the other day, look, it's losing the propaganda war and winning the war against Hamas. There's only one that's existential, really. I think at a certain point, and no matter what Israel does, it's criticised. And that's where I think a lot of people do feel like the line is crossed from genuine, and legitimate criticism of Israel to soft anti-Semitism, because when the world's only Jewish state has standards imposed on it, again, I make the point that no other country in the world is required or demanded, then you do feel a bit singled out. But yeah, goodwill, yeah, it's unfortunate. But that's it. Somebody who's been on the right my entire life in various guises, the amount of people outside the Jewish community who have flooded me with texts and support. And one bloke I know has a flagpole. He's got an Israeli flag on it. There are people that realise, and this is, I guess, what the thing that's fascinating me about all this is, aside from right and wrong and everything else, the marches that we are seeing on the street, that we know are ugly and all sorts of other things. Again, I can understand why somebody with ancestry from Lebanon, as ugly as it is and as bad as that behavior is, but why have so many socialists in particular, why have so many lefties identified with Hamas? Why they, and it's not like a conversation like you and I are having, which is, yeah, Hamas is bad. Is this the right response? This is, oh, no, that those rapes never happened. That's Zionist propaganda. Oh, no, the Zionists are lying to you. I mean, why are so many people identifying with barbarism? How can so many people see the footage that we've all seen floating around Twitter saying, let's see, civilized democratic country or terrorist, quasi-state? Damn it, I'm going to go with the terrorists. I like the nihilists. It's a weird, and what it shows to me is that people really hate the West. People hate freedom. There's decolonialism thing. If it's all white, it's bad. It's even though Israel's multi-ethnic because Jews have come from Ethiopia and the Middle East and all sorts of other places. It's not surprising, but it's disturbing at this level. And I guess then it shouldn't be surprising to all of us that a bunch of Americans on TikTok are saying, Osama bin Laden had a point. Now, again, I don't agree with, in hindsight, with what happened after September 11 either, but it's different from saying, the America shouldn't, the neocon dream is silly and America needs to, close its bases, and saying, that Osama, he's just misunderstood. It's a weird dynamic, man. A very weird dynamic.
Yeah, and that I did want to talk a little bit about the sort of Australian, the Australia, not just Australia, but around the world, but also what we've seen in Australia, which is something I would say it is surprising. And I'm sure this has to do with the fact that I am not Jewish, but I did not realize the capacity for anti-Semitism that still existed. I thought anti-Semitism was kind of like, okay,
me too.
The on par with the racism card that gets thrown around all the time. But I have seen, like, from the river to the sea is a pretty explicit directive. And I've seen with the protests there are the sort of anti-Semitic, not sort of, the anti-Semitic.
But I was, again, you said the card. That's a very good point, because as I said, I have been an anti-Uncle Leo my entire life. I've said, do not play that card. It doesn't end well. I've said to people, look, this is Australia. Australians are the most, before this, Australians are the most open-hearted, kind, tolerant, loving people on the face of planet Earth. There is no anti-Semitism here, but there is one group of people that Australians will never abide and hate with all their hearts, and that is whingers, right? They hate people who complain all the time. There's a reason why Adam Woods gets booed to the footy and none of the other Indigenous players, right? Because he's always making a song and dance about how racist everybody is. Australians aren't racist against Aboriginals, but they hate being called racist for no reason. So yeah, I was with you. I was with, do not play that card. But yeah, it surprised me. In other words, what the hell's going on, man? But it feels like almost the forces of history. And this is why I've been tweeting a lot more and because I'm not active anymore really in the media, but I've got 14,000 Twitter followers as a hangover from my career. So I've just been using that platform to retweet and to try to shift the narrative, because I feel like I have to do something. Because I feel who I feel like. I feel like Theodor Herzl. Herzl was the founder of modern Zionism. He was born in Hungary in the 1800s, and he was not a religious guy or anything like that. He was actually an assimilationist. He was the first to say, look, we've been liberated from the ghetto. Jews have equal rights in Europe now. Can we stop acting so ghettoized? Can we stop acting so Jewish? We need to be a bit German, a bit continental European, a bit sophisticated. We need to assimilate. We need to be, equal citizens of the countries we live in. Don't shut ourselves. Then he, as a journalist, he started covering, anti-Semitism in Europe, not least of all the Dreyfus case. In the Dreyfus case, for those of you that don't know, there was a very decorated French general who was accused wrongly of spying for Germany. And during that trial, that spy trial, that trumped up, trial that he was subjected to, Herzl went to cover the baying crowds outside, and they didn't say kill Dreyfus. They didn't say kill the Jew. They said kill the Jews. And at that point, Herzl realized, shit, this is just an unstoppable force of history there. It will ebb, but it will flow, and we need a homeland for ourselves. And that's when the Zionist movement was reborn, and the rest is history. But yeah, I'm feeling like there is a pool of history here. It's a weird sort of. I feel like we're reverting to some sort of mean. And again, I'm lucky to have been on the right, and I have almost everybody I know is either extremely supportive or gets it. But a lot of progressive Jews I speak to are just they don't know who they are anymore, because all their friends, these are people, again, causes we don't support, but people who in good faith have supported Black Lives Matter and climate and trans rights and gay marriage and all sorts of other things, and all these people they lined up with are now missing in action for them, and it's sad.
The last thing that I wanted to get your opinion on, it is a bit of a change of focus. I'm assuming that you follow US politics at least a little bit.
Yeah,
and there
everybody.
is... Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
And a theory that I've been hearing a lot lately is the idea that the longer this war in Gaza and the Israel stuff goes on, the worse it is for the Democratic Party, because by and large, a lot of their donor class for Biden and for the Democrats is very pro-Israel, but their base, as we're seeing, is extremely pro-Palestine. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that idea there, because I find it very interesting.
It's a weird dynamic, isn't it? It's that's the question I've received over the years so much in political circles, which is, why are so many American Jews Democrats? Don't they realize, I guess a lot of, and that's changing. I mean, it used to be like sort of 80-20 Jewish support for Democrats, and that has changed a lot because of, the Rashida Tlaibs of the world, and because Trump was so good and all sorts of other things. But it's a weird dynamic. All I'll say about that is that, I don't know, I think there's this, again, look, good people take different views on Israel, and there's room for those debates. There really is. But a lot of the people marching in the streets, they don't know the first thing, and they don't want to know the first thing. Like so many, like climate and like a lot of other these things, there's a sub-rationality to it. But once that constituency exists, then countries can turn hostile pretty quickly. The Labor Party is already, very equivocal about this. And a lot of the theory is, a lot of the reason for that is, well, where are their ministers' seats? Well, they're in Western Sydney. Why is Tony Burke so bad on this? Well, he's got so many Western Sydney is his electorate. But yeah, look, I don't know how that dynamic will play itself out in the US. But yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. But if there is an election next year, I mean, the Trump, if a free and fair election were held tomorrow, Trump would win in a landslide. The problem that the Democrats have is they've been trying to put him in jail for the better part of 4 years. They're not stupid. They know if Trump wins, they're going to be in for it. They're going to, Trump is not. Yeah. Is not that principle that he's going to say, well, it's a free and democratic society. It's America. He's going to say, no, you're in jail. So they're going to, it's not completely outside the realm of possibility that they use World War III as a pretext to scuttle the election.
Yeah, I mean, General, I think it's Douglas McGregor who's a good voice on all of this.
What do you think of Trump, by the way? Are you a Trump person?
I am a big fan of what Trump represents because he represents that whole anti-establishment sentiment by the masses that are completely powerless. They can sense that something is deeply corrupt and wrong, but they're kind of powerless to do anything about it. So I'm a big fan of the sentiment. Trump in his first term was kind of a bit useless. Sort of tried to back out of tried to back out of the war in Syria, and then someone got rid of General Mad Dog Mattis or whatever he was because he refused to, and then someone got in his ear, and then he surrounded himself by kind of all of these worst people. In saying that, and we've talked about it a bit on the show.
He won't make that mistake again.
Well,
he won't make that mistake again.
He's been really good on all of the things that I've heard him talk about prior. Now, and that's kind of the thing, right? Trump is good at sounding good, and the question is whether he will be. But like on the Ukraine thing, he was awesome when DeSantis was umming and ahhing and all of that. He's still, I mean, Trump was bad on COVID. That's I think undeniable. And it's weird that DeSantis won't attack him on that.
It was. I mean, it was. Imagine if Scott Morrison had said to Daniel Andrews, this lockdown's gone too far. Trump actually did that. Look, I was a Trump skeptic in 2016 because I didn't like the protectionist stuff. I didn't really like the stuff about the Mexicans and all the rest. And I thought, oh well, who's this guy? I want a Marco Rubio or somebody, or Rand Paul or somebody. But then he took office and he started cutting huge cuts to corporate tax, huge cuts to red tape. Again, made more Middle East peace deals than any president before him put together. The only president in living memory who didn't get us into a war of some kind. I came to the quick realization this is actually the best conservative leader in my lifetime, or one of. And then I started to realize, Trump is a human hand grenade. He is a weapon. He's not the most elegant weapon sometimes, but he is a weapon that we have thrown against the bureaucratic, managerial, woke industrial complex as we know it, and blows up the Jenga tower of bullshit in real time. That's a great thing. So bring back the mean tweets, man. Bring back, mean tweets and no war and low taxes. I think that sounds like a pretty good place to be.
I think it's incorrect to hold him up as kind of like our savior, because I don't think he's an antidote for all the problems, but I think he's equivalent. How I would describe
my friend, remember this day. There are three things and only three things that can save us now: God, Bitcoin, and Donald Trump. That's my message.
I've got to say I like Vivek Ramaswamy more. Now, whether Vivek has any realistic chance of winning, I'd say he's closer to an antidote than Trump is. But Trump alone, for the reaction he elicits from when he won in 2016, was just the most cathartic experience.
It was a special moment.
He's equivalent to taking a shit in the White House, just on the floor, right in the middle, and it's like they can't stand it, but they can't get rid of it. Like he's just there. It's a repudiation of everything that holds itself to be so holier than thou about the establishment and about the state, and I love it for that reason alone. He's also hilarious. I mean, man, when he got the mugshot for like that the Democrats had been trying to get him in for God knows how long, pulls that mean kind of I'm gonna come get you face, and then
uses
it on
it to
Twitter.
raise millions of dollars, and uses it as a fundraising letter.
Yeah. He sold shirts, didn't he, with the face on it? I think so.
Look,
like
if they permit a free election and Trump wins, then I'm just now lost in my own hopes and dreams.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good spot to leave it there for today. I was there anything else you wanted to say before we cut off about anything that we've spoken about today?
I'll come back sometime. We'll talk about bread and butter libertarian issues. We can talk about drug law reform and crypto and the monetary system and the economic crisis we're about to go into. But it's been fun.
Perfect. I would love for that to happen. I love talking
Yeah.
about all of those things. I wanted to talk to you for a while, but then this I think this was the most pertinent thing to talk about for today. But I would
Yeah.
love to have you back on to chat about any of that other
Oh,
stuff.
and thank you for giving me the platform and for putting your counterpoints as well. I mean, these are all legitimate questions. Again, they're going to make the point. Good people can disagree on this issue even vehemently. But the ratbags marching. All right, well, that's the great irony of this Osama stuff. We're going to see so many of these trots convert to Islam. Like all these people who, gender equality and my pronouns matter, and then all of a sudden they're going to be, donning the bloody hijab and the burqa and so on. Anyway, it's a weird world, man.
They're gonna have a weird moment of realization halfway through there when they realize what Islam entails and they're going down that rabbit hole.
Anyway. Anyway, it's been fun, mate. But anyway, I'm off to play golf like my hero Donald J. Trump. Now watch this drive.
Enjoy.
Thanks,
yeah, George Bush.
Thanks for getting the reference. See you, great man.
All right, thank you very much. We'll catch you all next time.